Marcus Reynard wiped the sweat from his brow as the mining drone sputtered and stalled, its drill bit jammed with an unyielding chunk of titanium ore. He groaned, tossing his gloves onto the control panel and muttering curses at the stubborn machinery. Life on the asteroid belt was monotonous, but it was peaceful, exactly what he wanted. No more orders barked through comm channels. No more battlefields littered with friends and enemies alike. Just the hum of mining rigs, the occasional distant glow of a passing freighter, and the endless stars. That peace shattered the moment his sensors screamed to life. Marcus bolted upright as the proximity alert flashed across his console. A large object was tumbling toward his mining station, its trajectory erratic but unmistakable. It was coming in fast. Cursing under his breath, he grabbed the controls to rotate the station's exterior cameras. A battered alien ship spun wildly against the backdrop of stars, its hull scared and scorched, venting streams of gas and debris. Unregistered vessel, the automated voice of his station chirped. Collision course detected. "Yeah, I can see that," Marcus muttered, slamming his fist against the emergency override. The station's thrusters fired in a slow arc, moving him out of the ship's path. He watched as the craft drifted closer, slowing as it grazed the station's gravitational tether. Against his better judgment, Marcus suited up and prepared to investigate. He hated himself for it. He could have just reported the crash to the nearest patrol station and let someone else handle it. But something about the ship felt wrong. It wasn't human, but it didn't match the profiles of any known alien species either. When Marcus entered the airlock, the smell of burnt metal and scorched flesh hit him, even through the filters of his suit. The interior of the ship was a graveyard. Bodies, if you could call them that, were slumped over the controls, their forms twisted and alien. The walls were etched with strange glyphs, glowing faintly as if alive. Marcus frowned, his unease growing with every step. At the center of the ship's wreckage, he found it. A black oblong object hovered in the air, pulsating faintly with a deep crimson light. It looked organic yet mechanical, as if it were alive and machine at the same time. Marcus's instincts screamed at him to leave it alone, but the moment he stepped closer, the artifact pulsed violently, sending out a shockwave that knocked him off his feet. His comms crackled. Unknown signal detected, broadcasting wide-spectrum distress beacon. Marcus's stomach dropped. He scrambled to his feet, backing away from the artifact as its glow intensified. The glyphs on the walls flared to life, and the ship began to tremble. Whatever this thing was, it had just called out into the void, and something out there was listening. By the time Marcus returned to his station, his scanners lit up with activity. Ships were emerging from hyperspace, their sleek, biomechanical designs unlike anything he'd ever seen. He stared in horror as they began to spread, moving with eerie precision. The Mercari had heard the call. And Marcus Reynard, whether he liked it or not, was now caught in the middle of a war he wanted no part of. The Sentinel base loomed in the distance, a hulking structure carved into a massive asteroid. Its jagged silhouette was lit by the faint glow of nearby stars, radiating an aura of secrecy and danger. Marcus sat stiffly in the cockpit of the small shuttle transporting him there, his jaw clenched as he ignored the stern glances of the other passengers. Most were veterans of the Sentinel Order, humans and aliens alike, their faces hardened by years of service. Marcus, by contrast, felt like a man out of place. The shuttle's landing was rough, jolting Marcus out of his thoughts. As the ramp lowered, Commander Ilara Voss waited at the base entrance. Her sharp gaze scanned him like a scanner detecting flaws in a piece of machinery. She was everything Marcus expected a Sentinel leader to be: cold, efficient, and utterly unimpressed by him. "Reynard," she said, her voice clipped and authoritative, "you've been dragged into this because of the artifact you found. It's now your responsibility. I don't care about your war records or your preference for mining rocks. You'll pull your weight, or you'll get people killed. Understood?" Marcus suppressed a sigh. Crystal clear. The days that followed were a blur of grueling drills and harsh lessons. The Sentinels didn't waste time easing him in. They threw him into the deep end. Simulated combat scenarios, weapons calibration, fleet tactics. Marcus found himself thrust into areas he thought he'd left behind long ago. Despite his resentment, his muscle memory kicked in, and he quickly regained the edge that had made him a legend during the Terran Wars. But this wasn't the Terran Wars. The Mercari weren't ordinary enemies. That truth hit home when an urgent alarm sent Marcus and a team of Sentinels scrambling to intercept a Mercari scout ship detected near a vulnerable system. Marcus, still unfamiliar with the Sentinel protocols, was partnered with a stoic alien named Drelvok, whose species boasted reflexes faster than human thought. Together, they boarded a sleek Sentinel corvette and shot toward the scout ship. The Mercari vessel was a nightmare of organic and mechanical components fused together. It pulsed with an unnatural light, its surface writhing as if alive. The closer they got, the louder the static in Marcus's comms grew, accompanied by a faint, dissonant whisper. "Weapons hot," Drelvok said, his voice calm despite the tension. Engaging boarding maneuver. The ship's interior was worse. As they moved through its dark, pulsating corridors, Marcus's skin crawled. They found the crew, or what was left of them, mutated into grotesque forms, their bodies twisted and fused with their environment. The Mercari's bioweapons didn't just kill, they repurposed. The team's objective was to disable the ship's beacon, which was relaying coordinates back to the Mercari fleet. When they reached the core, a monstrosity awaited them. A Mercari construct, a towering fusion of flesh and machine, guarding the beacon. The ensuing fight was brutal. The creature's speed and strength far exceeded anything Marcus had encountered before, but his instincts took over. Marcus managed to land a critical shot on the construct's exposed core, causing it to collapse in a heap of smoking metal and gore. As the beacon shut down, he turned to see Drelvok nodding approvingly. "Not bad for a reluctant recruit," Drelvok said. But Marcus couldn't share the moment. His stomach churned as he looked at the corrupted remains around him. This was just a scout ship, and it had nearly killed them all. If this was what the Mercari could do on a small scale, humanity was in far greater danger than anyone realized. As they returned to the base, Marcus felt the weight of his new role settling on his shoulders. He hadn't chosen this fight, but there was no escaping it now. Back at the Sentinel base, the halls buzzed with activity as personnel prepared for the next stage of the war. Marcus sat in the debriefing room, watching a holo projection of the Mercari scout ship they'd destroyed. The details made his skin crawl. The pulsating, organic hull, the biomechanical monstrosities aboard, and most unsettling of all, the beacon's design. Commander Elara Voss strode into the room, her expression as severe as ever. She tapped the console, and the projection shifted to a galactic map. Red flares marked systems already overrun or under siege. "The Mercari are spreading faster than anticipated," she said, her tone cold and measured. "We've confirmed they're using similar beacons to coordinate their fleet. If we don't shut these down, their invasion force will outmaneuver us at every turn." Marcus leaned back, arms crossed. "And how do you suggest we do that? We barely survived the last one." Elara's eyes narrowed. "We adapt. That's what Sentinels do. Something you'd understand if you stopped complaining long enough to learn." Before Marcus could reply, the lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, followed by a sharp alarm. Elara's wrist comm lit up, and she glanced at the incoming report. Her face darkened. "Internal security breach," she barked. "Deck 7. Unauthorized access to classified files." The room erupted into motion. Marcus followed Elara and a team of Sentinels as they rushed through the base's labyrinthine corridors. Deck 7 was deep within the asteroid, reserved for secure archives and weapons development. When they arrived, the doors were already blown open. Inside, sparks rained from severed conduits, and data cores hummed ominously, their contents being siphoned. The lone figure in Sentinel armor worked furiously at a terminal. "Stop!" Ilara shouted. The figure turned, and for a split second, Marcus saw hesitation. Then they bolted. Marcus acted on instinct, sprinting after the traitor. They weaved through the base's winding passages, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind him. The traitor was fast, but Marcus had years of combat experience on his side. He closed the distance, lunging forward and tackling them to the ground. "Get off me!" The figure snarled, their voice distorted by the helmet. Marcus ripped the helmet off, revealing a young Sentinel recruit, one he vaguely recognized from training. Her eyes burned with defiance, but there was fear there too. "You don't understand," she spat. "The Mercari. They're not just invaders. They're offering salvation. They can save us from ourselves." Marcus tightened his grip. "Save us? By turning us into that." He gestured toward a nearby holo image of a Mercari monstrosity. "You're delusional." Before she could reply, Ilara and the others caught up. The traitor was subdued and taken away, but the damage was done. The files she'd accessed contained critical intel on Sentinel operations, and, worse, the artifact Marcus had recovered. Later, in the briefing room, Ilara's voice was grim. "The Mercari didn't just infiltrate us. They're manipulating us. There could be more traitors. We're fighting an enemy that doesn't just conquer worlds. It burrows into our minds and twists our beliefs." Marcus stared at the holomap, where the red flares seemed to multiply by the second. He hated the Sentinel's rigid structure, but for the first time, he saw their purpose. Humanity was teetering on the edge of annihilation, and unless they found a way to outthink the Mercari, they wouldn't survive the coming storm. Ilara turned to him, her eyes piercing. "We need people who can think like you, Reynard. Unpredictable, adaptable, ruthless. You're more important to this fight than you realize." Marcus didn't respond immediately. The weight of her words sank in, and with them, a grim realization. The Mercari weren't just an external threat. They were inside, festering in the cracks of humanity's defenses. He straightened, his jaw set. "Then we need to start thinking 2 steps ahead of them." The war room was silent, save for the hum of holographic displays projecting a 3-dimensional star map. Marcus stood with his arms crossed, listening to Ilara Voss as she briefed the senior Sentinels. Her voice was steady, but the tension in the room was palpable. "The artifact we recovered from Reynard's station isn't just a beacon," Ilara said, pointing to the red, pulsating image hovering in the air. "It's one piece of a key. The Mercari are gathering these fragments to activate an ancient superweapon." Murmurs rippled through the group, but Marcus spoke up, his tone sharp. "What kind of weapon?" Ilara's eyes met his, her expression grim. "We don't know exactly. What we do know is that it's not just meant to conquer. It's designed to rewrite reality, to erase entire species, planets, histories." The weight of her words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had thought the Mercari were bad enough as conquerors, but this was on a scale he couldn't even fathom. Ilara continued, her voice hardening. "We've intercepted fragments of their plans. The next piece of the key is located in a derelict star fortress in the Jorith Nebula. It's deep in Mercari-claimed space, and they're already en route." "So we get there first," Marcus said. Ilara nodded. "Exactly. But this won't be easy. The fortress is ancient, and our intel suggests it's heavily booby-trapped. You'll lead the team, Reynard." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Me? Since when am I the go-to guy for suicide missions?" "Since you're the only one who's faced the Mercari and lived," Ilara shot back. "You've proven you can think on your feet. This isn't a debate." Marcus bit back a retort. He didn't like taking orders, but Ilara was right. The stakes were too high. The journey to the Jorith Nebula was tense. Marcus sat in the cockpit of the sleek Sentinel corvette, his team preparing for what lay ahead. Drelvok, his alien partner, meticulously inspected their gear while Lieutenant Kira Thorne, a fiery explosives expert, adjusted her neural implants. When they arrived, the star fortress loomed ahead, an enormous, decaying relic orbiting a dying star. Its jagged architecture seemed almost alive, its spires twisted as if frozen mid-scream. "Charming," Marcus muttered. The team docked at a crumbling airlock and entered the fortress. The corridors were dark and labyrinthine, lit only by the faint glow of ancient glyphs etched into the walls. Marcus's every step felt heavy, as if the air itself carried the weight of the countless lives lost here. As they moved deeper, the traps began. Walls shifted without warning, separating team members. Mechanical sentinels emerged from hidden alcoves, their ancient programming still deadly. Marcus fought through them with precision, but every encounter drained their resources. When they finally reached the central chamber, the key fragment hovered in the air, suspended in a web of energy. But as Marcus approached, the chamber trembled, and a deep, guttural voice echoed around them. Interlopers. The Mercari were already here. A massive construct descended from the ceiling, its body a grotesque fusion of living flesh and alien metal. It moved with horrifying grace, and its voice burrowed into Marcus's mind. "You cannot stop what has already begun." The battle was chaos. The construct's attacks were devastating, but Marcus's team fought with everything they had. Kira planted explosives to disrupt its movements, while Drelvok used his inhuman speed to strike at its weak points. In the end, Marcus delivered the final blow, plunging an energy blade into the construct's core. It collapsed in a heap of writhing parts, and the chamber fell silent. But there was no time to celebrate. Marcus grabbed the key fragment, and the fortress began to collapse around them. As they escaped to the Corvette, Marcus couldn't shake the construct's final words. "You cannot stop what has already begun." Back aboard the Sentinel base, Ilara examined the key fragment, her face pale. "They're further along than we thought," she said quietly. "If they assemble the entire key, we won't just lose this war. We'll lose everything." Marcus sat in silence, the weight of their mission pressing down on him. The Mercari weren't just building a weapon. They were building extinction, and they were running out of time. Marcus sat alone in the Sentinel base's observation deck, staring out at the stars. He could see the faint glimmer of the Jorath Nebula in the distance, still fresh in his memory. The Mercuri's construct, the collapsing fortress, and the key fragment, all of it haunted him. The stakes had been high before, but now they were astronomical. He clenched his fists, the faint hum of the station's engines the only sound around him. His solitude was interrupted by the sound of boots on metal flooring. Turning, Marcus saw Drelvok approaching, his alien partner's expression unreadable as always. "You sit here, brooding," Drelvok said, folding his arms. "Meanwhile, the rest of us prepare for war." Marcus exhaled sharply. "I'm thinking. You should try it sometime." Drelvok tilted his head, his reflective eyes narrowing. "Thinking won't save us from what's coming, Reynard. Action will." Before Marcus could reply, the base's comm system flared to life. "All personnel, report to the war room immediately. Priority 1 briefing." The urgency in Ilara's voice was unmistakable. Marcus and Drelvok exchanged a glance before hurrying to the command center. The room was already crowded when they arrived, holograms of key Mercury-controlled systems flickering above the table. Ilara stood at the center, her posture rigid, her tone sharp. "We've intercepted critical intelligence," she began. "One of our forward scouts managed to infiltrate a Mercury dreadnought before being detected. What they discovered changes everything." The room fell silent as the hologram shifted to display a new map, this one dotted with glowing red nodes. "These are Mercury sleeper cells," Ilara explained. "They've infiltrated human and allied colonies, lying dormant until activated. Their purpose is sabotage, critical infrastructure, planetary defenses, even entire fleets." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Marcus frowned. "How many cells are we talking about?" Ilara's jaw tightened. Hundreds. And these are just the ones we know of. The realization hit Marcus like a punch. The Mercari weren't just fighting an external war. They were eroding humanity from within. Your next mission is to neutralize one of these cells, Ilara continued. We've identified a high-ranking Mercari agent embedded in a trade hub on New Corinth. This agent has been coordinating sleeper activity across the sector. If we take them out, we can delay their plans and buy ourselves some time. The mission to New Corinth was unlike anything Marcus had faced before. The trade hub was a sprawling, chaotic station filled with smugglers, traders, and refugees. Disguised as merchants, Marcus and his team moved through the bustling markets, scanning for signs of the Mercari agent. The tension was suffocating. Every face was a potential threat, every passerby a potential Mercari operative. Marcus kept his hand close to his concealed weapon, his eyes darting to every shadow. Finally, they found their target. The agent was a human woman, or at least she appeared to be. Marcus knew better. The Mercari's ability to alter their agents was insidious, and he could see the faint telltale signs, unnatural symmetry in her features, a subtle glow behind her eyes. The team moved to intercept, but the agent was prepared. She activated a device on her wrist, and chaos erupted. Explosions tore through the market, sending debris and panicked civilians everywhere. Marcus and Drelvok pursued the agent through the crumbling corridors of the station, weaving through the chaos. The agent was fast, but Marcus's determination was unyielding. When they finally cornered her in a dimly lit maintenance tunnel, she smiled, a chilling, knowing expression. "You think killing me will change anything?" she sneered. "The Mercari don't need to invade. Humanity is already tearing itself apart." Before Marcus could respond, she triggered a hidden device. Her body convulsed, and she began to disintegrate in a burst of energy. As the dust settled, Marcus realized they had won the skirmish but not the war. The agent's final words echoed in his mind, a grim reminder of the enemy's true power. They thrived on humanity's flaws, exploiting divisions and weaknesses. Back on the Sentinel base, Ilara's expression was a mix of relief and concern. "You succeeded," she said, "but it's clear the Mercari's reach is deeper than we feared. If we don't act fast, they won't just defeat us. They'll make us destroy ourselves." Marcus nodded grimly. He hadn't signed up for this, but the fight was his now. And the Mercari weren't just enemies. They were the shadows inside every crack of humanity's defenses. The Sentinel base was quieter than usual. The team's success on New Corinth had bought them some time, but the weight of the Mercari's infiltration loomed over everyone. Marcus sat at the edge of the briefing table, the remains of the agent's disintegration device laid out before him. Engineers and analysts had picked it apart, uncovering something deeply unsettling. "It's a neural relay," one of the techs explained, gesturing to the alien components. "These devices allow the Mercari to link their agents into a hive-like network. That's how they're so coordinated. It's not just strategy. It's shared thought." Marcus leaned closer, frowning. "You're saying they're all connected, like one big mind?" The tech nodded. "In a way. But here's the kicker. This relay wasn't transmitting back to their fleet. It was transmitting somewhere deeper, a core signal point hidden in uncharted space." That caught Ilara's attention. She stepped forward, her expression grim. "If we can locate this signal point, we might be able to sever their network. Without it, their hive-mind coordination would falter. It could give us a real chance." Marcus looked at the star chart lighting up with potential coordinates. "And what's the catch?" Ilara's lips pressed into a thin line. "The location is deep in Mercari territory, in a system they've fortified heavily. If we go, we'll be heading straight into the heart of the beast." Marcus's gaze swept across the room. Everyone looked tense, the weight of the mission sinking in. Finally, he straightened, his voice steady. "Then we don't wait. The longer we sit here, the more they dig in." The journey to the signal point felt like stepping into the abyss. The Sentinel fleet moved cautiously, weaving through nebula and debris fields to avoid detection. Marcus's team was aboard a stealth frigate, its hull coated in experimental cloaking tech. Tension crackled in the air as they neared the coordinates, and even Drelvok's normally calm demeanor seemed strained. When they dropped out of warp, the sight that greeted them was beyond anything Marcus had imagined. The Mercury signal point was not a planet or a station. It was an immense construct orbiting a pulsar, its structure a grotesque lattice of organic and mechanical components. Tendrils of energy coursed between the pulsar and the construct, as if the star itself were being consumed to power the hive network. "This is it," Ilara said over the comms. "The heart of their operation." Marcus tightened his grip on his controls. "And it's crawling with Mercury ships." Dozens of Mercury vessels patrolled the area, their strange, undulating shapes glowing faintly with bioluminescence. The Sentinel fleet stayed back, using the frigate's stealth systems to slip past the enemy perimeter. Marcus's team would infiltrate the construct, plant charges at key points, and detonate the network. Inside the construct, the atmosphere was suffocating. The corridors were alive, pulsating like veins in a living organism. The team moved carefully, their weapons at the ready, but the construct seemed to respond to their presence. Lights flickered and strange. Echoing whispers filled the air. "Eyes sharp," Marcus muttered, his voice low. "This place isn't dead. It's watching us." As they approached the first target, a massive conduit channeling energy from the pulsar, the construct reacted. Walls shifted, sealing off exits, and Mercury constructs emerged from hidden alcoves. The team fought fiercely, their weapons cutting through the grotesque enemies, but the resistance was unrelenting. "Plant the charges," Marcus shouted, covering Kira as she set the explosives. The team moved from conduit to conduit, each encounter more brutal than the last. By the time they reached the final target, they were battered and low on resources. But the worst was yet to come. In the central chamber, a massive Mercury overseer awaited them, its form towering and grotesque. It radiated a palpable malice, its voice echoing in their minds. "You think destroying this place will stop us," it hissed. "We are infinite. We are inevitable." The battle that followed was a nightmare. The overseer manipulated the construct itself, summoning waves of drones and altering the environment to trap the team. Marcus fought with everything he had, pushing his team to their limits. Finally, with the charges set and the overseer weakened, Marcus delivered the killing blow, driving his blade into the creature's core. As the team raced back to their frigate, the charges detonated. The construct collapsed in on itself, and the pulsar erupted in a brilliant wave of energy, taking dozens of Mercury ships with it. Back aboard the fleet, Ilara's voice was filled with relief. "You've severed their network. The Mercury will be disoriented. This is our chance to push back." But Marcus didn't feel like celebrating. He stared at the debris on the view screen, the overseer's final words echoing in his mind. "They're infinite," he muttered, "and we've only scratched the surface." The glow of the collapsing pulsar still burned in Marcus's mind as the team returned to the Sentinel base. The mission had been a success. They had severed the Mercury's hive network, throwing their forces into disarray. But victory came at a cost. Marcus had seen too much death, and the haunting echoes of the Mercury overseer's final words wouldn't leave him. As he stepped off the frigate, Ilara was waiting, her expression unreadable. She nodded at him, her gaze flicking to the battered and bruised team behind him. "You did it," she said simply. "The construct is gone, and our intel shows the Mercury fleets are scrambling without their network to coordinate them." Marcus didn't reply immediately. His mind was still in the pulsar system, in the living corridors of that grotesque construct. He shook his head and sighed. "We hit them hard, but it's not over. They'll regroup. They always do." Ilara's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's why we're not stopping. The disruption gives us a chance to strike their central command. We've located their primary fleet staging ground. If we can take it out, we cripple their ability to wage war on this scale." Marcus frowned, the wariness in his body suddenly giving way to suspicion. "How do we even know where their staging ground is? We've been fighting blind until now." Ilara hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Marcus to notice. She gestured for him to follow her into the war room. "We had help," she said finally. Inside, the holographic table displayed a massive Mercury fleet orbiting a dark, lifeless world. Dozens of dreadnoughts and carriers loomed on the map, surrounded by swarms of smaller ships. But Marcus barely glanced at the display. His attention was fixed on the figure standing in the shadows near the table. It was a Mercury. The alien's appearance was grotesque, but eerily humanoid. Its skin shimmered like polished obsidian, and its golden eyes gleamed with intelligence and cunning. Marcus's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but Ilara raised a hand to stop him. "This is Kareth," she said. "A defector. He's the reason we found the signal point, and why we know where the Mercury are regrouping." Marcus narrowed his eyes at the alien. "You expect me to trust this thing after everything they've done?" Kareth inclined its head, its voice smooth and deliberate. "I understand your anger, human, but I am not like the others. I was severed from the hive mind long ago, cast out for questioning their ways. I know their weaknesses, their flaws, and I seek their destruction as much as you do." Marcus wasn't convinced. "And what's in it for you?" Kareth's golden eyes seemed to pierce through him. "Survival. The Mercury's plans will consume everything, even those who oppose them. Helping you is the only way to ensure my kind does not vanish from existence." Ilara stepped in, her voice firm. "Kareth has already proven valuable. The staging ground intel checks out. If we hit it, we can turn the tide." Marcus shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You're putting all your faith in an enemy we barely understand. One wrong move, and this defector could lead us straight into a trap." Kareth stepped closer, unflinching. "If I wanted to betray you, Marcus Reynard, I would not have shown myself. The Mercury do not offer second chances to those who fail them." The room fell silent. Marcus studied the alien, searching for any sign of deceit, but all he found was a calm certainty that unnerved him. Finally, he exhaled and turned to Ilara. "This is a bad idea, but if we're doing this, I'm leading the mission. I'll keep an eye on our new friend." The plan was audacious. Infiltrate the staging ground using Kareth's knowledge of Mercury security systems, plant explosives on their primary dreadnoughts, and escape before the fleet could react. The operation would require precision, bravery, and a whole lot of luck. As the Sentinel fleet prepared to jump to the staging ground, Marcus stood with his team, briefing them one last time. Drelvok was skeptical but willing to follow his lead. Kira was fiery as ever, determined to see it through, and Kareth stood at the edge of the group, silent and unreadable. "This is it," Marcus said. "We've punched them in the gut. Now we go for the throat. Stay sharp, watch each other's backs, and don't trust anything you see, especially not our new ally." Kareth didn't react to the jab. Instead, it simply said, "You will see the truth soon enough, Marcus Reynard. The Mercury's arrogance will be their undoing." As the fleet prepared to jump, Marcus felt the familiar mix of adrenaline and dread. The mission ahead would determine the fate of the war, and possibly the fate of humanity itself. The Sentinel fleet emerged from warp space on the edge of the Mercury staging ground. The void before them was a fortress of dreadnoughts, carriers, and swarming fighter craft, each ship glowing faintly with the bioorganic energy that defined Mercury technology. Orbiting a cold, desolate world, the staging ground was a perfect symbol of the enemy, unfeeling, efficient, and merciless. Marcus sat in the cockpit of the stealth frigate, his knuckles white as he gripped the controls. The rest of the team was strapped in behind him, tense and silent. Kareth stood in the corner, seemingly unaffected by the danger they were heading into. "This is suicide," Drelvok muttered, breaking the silence. "Even if we plant the charges, there's no way we're getting out of this alive." Marcus didn't look back. "Then we make sure it's worth it. If we don't do this, there won't be anything left to fight for." Kareth finally spoke, its voice as calm and calculating as ever. "The dreadnought you seek, Ascendant Will, is at the center of the formation. Its destruction will trigger a chain reaction that will cripple the fleet. I will guide you through their defenses." Marcus's lips tightened. "You'd better hope you're right." Using Kareth's knowledge, the frigate slipped past the outer patrols, weaving through debris fields and sensor blind spots. Every second felt like an eternity as the massive Mercury vessels loomed around them. The frigate docked onto a maintenance port on the side of the Ascendant Will, and the team disembarked into the enemy ship's eerie, pulsating corridors. The interior of the dreadnought was worse than anything they had faced before. The walls seemed alive, shifting and writhing as if reacting to their presence. Strange, whispered voices echoed through the air, unnerving even Drelvok, who prided himself on his unshakable composure. "This place is alive," Kira whispered, her voice trembling. "It's watching us." "Focus," Marcus said, forcing his own fear down. "Stick to the plan." They moved quickly, planting charges at key structural points while avoiding patrols of Mercury drones. Kareth led the way, its movements precise and confident. But as they approached the central core, the air grew heavier, the whispers louder. Then the trap sprang. The walls around them shifted violently, sealing off exits and flooding the chamber with Mercury constructs. Towering biomechanical creatures with jagged limbs emerged from the shadows, their glowing eyes filled with malice. "You've come far," a voice echoed, deep and resonant. It was the same voice Marcus had heard in the pulsar construct. "But you will not leave this place alive." The central core descended from the ceiling, a massive, throbbing sphere of light and tendrils, pulsing with energy. It wasn't just a power source, it was alive, an extension of the Mercury hive mind. "Kareth," Marcus shouted over the chaos as the team opened fire. "You knew this would happen." Kareth didn't flinch. "Yes, but it is necessary." Before Marcus could respond, Kareth lunged forward, its form shifting and distorting. It attacked the Mercury drones with a ferocity that stunned even Marcus. "I was severed from the hive, but I remember its pain, its arrogance. Today, I return to end it." The team fought desperately, covering Kareth as it approached the core. The alien's body glowed with an otherworldly light as it interfaced with the tendrils, its voice echoing with resolve. "I can sever the hive's connection, but it will cost me everything." Marcus hesitated, torn between anger and admiration. "Are you sure about this?" Kareth looked back, its golden eyes softer than he had ever seen. "Go. Finish your mission. My debt ends here." The team planted the final charges and retreated as Kareth fused with the core. The alien's screams reverberated through the ship, a mix of agony and triumph, as the hive mind's grip shattered. The walls convulsed, and the Mercury drones collapsed, lifeless. Back aboard the frigate, Marcus watched as the charges detonated, tearing the Ascendant Will apart. The explosion spread like wildfire, consuming the surrounding ships. The Mercury fleet was in chaos, their coordination shattered. Ilara's voice came over the comms. "You did it, Marcus. The Mercury are broken. We've won." But Marcus didn't feel like celebrating. He stared at the burning wreckage, Kareth's final words echoing in his mind. "Even arrogance can be defeated, if someone dares to stand against it." As the frigate jumped back to friendly space, Marcus allowed himself a moment of hope. The war wasn't over, but humanity had proven it could fight back against the infinite. And for the first time, he believed they might actually win.